What?
I think we all say true. Yeah,
I love you.
Same chemistry.
Kyoshi was running through the woods, her eyes darting around searching for any sign of she. She called out between pants of breath. Where are you? She had been looking for him for hours now, and she was starting to get really worried about how long he'd be outside. Rangi's little brother tended to wander off all by himself when he got bored or hungry, so Kyoshi had taken it upon herself that day to go on a search party with her friend after dinner time rolled around and they couldn't find him anywhere at home. It had gotten dark fast, which made matters worse because if she were feeling adventurous enough today, his light brown curls would be hard to spot in the forest. She called again, this time her voice carrying over the meadow. He's not here, Rangi informed her with a frown, her yellow eyes glancing around worriedly at his best friend. Her black hair was tied back in her usual braid to keep it out of the way while they searched for she. Kyoshi sighed and shook her head. No, still haven't found him yet, Kyoshi groaned. Is it really so frustrating to have a brother? Yes, she said bluntly, earning a laugh from the other girl who had moved over to sit down on a nearby rock. She was exhausted from all the running around looking for him. Just as Kyoshi was about to offer Rangi a hand getting up on the rock beside her, she heard someone calling for help coming from the other side of the trees. She called out happily, forgetting all about Rangi and running towards the sound of his voice. Where are you? I'm stuck. The little boy called out again, his voice panicked now. Kyoshi rushed through the trees until she found she standing in front of an old tree that had fallen over during a storm. He was holding onto it with all his might as though he thought if he let go he would fall into some unknown, unseen abyss. She rushed over to him and wrapped her arms around him, sighing in relief that he was all right. Where were you? Kyoshi asked, pulling back slightly so she could look at his face properly. We've been looking everywhere for you. She widened his eyes. I know, he hesitated with a guilty look on his face. I'm sorry. I just got lost is all. It's fine. Kyoshi smiled at him and climbed up onto the tree to sit down beside him. She shifted over nervously as their legs touched and Rangi came walking through the trees towards them. But suddenly a large figure appeared out of the shadows with a menacing glare and bloodthirsty smirk. I'll take that boy, the man said, pointing at she and Kyoshi. Rangi glanced back and forth between them and the stranger. Who are you? Rangi demanded, and what do you want with she? The man chuckled and moved closer to them. Kyoshi's eyes narrowed as the man stepped into the small bit of moonlight that could reach them under the trees. Once he was illuminated, she realized who it was and her jaw dropped in disbelief. You? She exclaimed, unable to keep the shock off her face. Instantly the man's attention was drawn to her and his eyes lit up. Yes, me, he said with an eager grin, and you're Kyoshi, right? I remember your face from the poster in the town hall. Rangi looked between them with a puzzled expression on her face, but she was still oblivious to the stranger's identity. You know, you remind me of my daughter, he said with a thoughtful look. Kyoshi glared at him. She had those same pretty emerald eyes. Kyoshi's hand shot up and slapped the man across the face as hard as she could. Don't you dare say that. You're a monster. The man shook his head at her as he gingerly rubbed his cheek. Now, he said, not bothering to fight back. That's no way to. He never got a chance to finish his sentence because Kyoshi punched him in the mouth. His eyes widened and she could feel her hand stinging from the force of it. I'm sorry, Kyoshi ground out through clenched teeth, that I do not take too kindly to strangers who try and kidnap my friends. The man chuckled once more and wiped away some blood from his split lip. And yet when you tried to escape this place all by yourself you almost died. He looked at she then with a raised eyebrow, and this little tyke isn't even related to you. Kyoshi was about to leave with she and her sister Rangi when all of a sudden the man clapped his hand twice. A large beast-like figure appeared out of the forest and revealed itself to them. Kyoshi noticed that it was a wild boar-looking monster. It was the size of a 9-foot giant and its tusks were sharp enough to cut through anything easily. The monster charged straight for Rangi and she. Kyoshi grabbed her fans and fire bent directly toward the monster, knocking it off its feet. Kyoshi was aiming for the beast's eyes but instead hit its tusk. Rangi and her brother Shi were stunned at what they just witnessed. If it hadn't been for Kyoshi's quick and agile reflexes, they would have been destroyed by that gigantic beast. Kyoshi hastily told them to run as fast as they could. As the boy and girl began to run, Kyoshi kept on bending fire at the monster in an attempt to keep it away from them. Rangi looked back over her shoulder only to see that the monster was catching up with them fast. The man just stood there watching, then started laughing hysterically after he saw what had just occurred. He sat down on a log and stared at Kyoshi with a big grin on his face. Kyoshi took notice of this but didn't say anything about it because she needed to keep all of her focus on keeping the beast away from her friends who were running for their lives. Kyoshi and the three of them were still some distance away when he bent a gust of wind overtaking both Kyoshi and the monster. He continued to watch as Kyoshi was sent flying through the air toward him. She finally landed on her feet and began to fight the beast head-on. The man started laughing again as he watched Kyoshi fighting off that wild animal all by herself. She wasn't able to keep up with it for long because eventually, the creature's tusks pierced right through her abdomen, spilling blood everywhere. She and Rangi had stopped running once they saw this happen but could only stand there and watch as their friend is dying in front of them. "Stop!" cried she, but not a single one of them could hear her. Rangi stared at the scene in horror, and it was only after she heard she say her name that she snapped out of it and returned to reality. "We have to go," she told. I can't leave Kyoshi," Rangi cried, still staring at what was happening. The wild beast of a boar bellowed a roar as its tusks pierced through Kyoshi's stomach. Blood spilled down her body and all the way to the floor, pooling around Kyoshi's feet. She was gasping for air, struggling with every movement. All seemed lost until Kyoshi raised her head and slowly opened her eyes. The wild boar winced, shocked to see that both of her eyes are glowing. In a flash, Kyoshi pulled herself off the wild boar's tusks and gathered all of her strength to drop the beast under a large sinkhole that she created with earthbending. The sinkhole was deep, really deep, but Kyoshi didn't care. All she wanted was to make sure the wild boar would never go near her friends ever again. Kyoshi felt dizzy and tired after that, so she fainted right then and there.